Fucking Skype. Boy, did you make this episode a bittersweet memory. I was fucking pumped to be able to chat with Robert Vigna, founder and guitarist for the almighty Immolation. But as luck would have it, when it came to the actual call itself, Skype just refused to do its thing. So, I had to slip into producer mode and let Peter take over. Here's that chat.
Let's deep dive now into your new album, Acts of God. I mean, it's been 5 years since the last album. And when you think about it, like 5 years can be a short period of time when it comes to a career like yours, and it can be a long period of time, right? So take us back to like when the work actually started on the new album.
Well, yeah, I mean, 5 years is a long, typically you don't want to have 5 years between records. I could tell you that, but due to the pandemic, that made things go a little bit longer than we anticipated. But yeah, luckily we had a lot of touring for Atonement. So like you mentioned, we did a ton in 2019. So 2020 was really going to be our year for getting the album done, like finishing the writing and getting it recorded. So due to the pandemic, that pushed things back a little bit, obviously. But as far as the writing goes, I started writing songs at the end, mid to the end of 2018. So by the time we were rehearsing for our 2019 tours, early in 2019, we were actually playing 3 or 4 of those songs together at rehearsal. Which is a very unusual thing for us. Yeah, so that's very odd for us. So yeah, we had stuff going, and once the touring really kicked in, I wrote a little bit more, maybe, midway through the year. But then once we started touring, as of that summer hit, it was that, we were like full force until like December. So the writing kind of stopped for a moment. And then I started picking up again the end of 2019 and probably early 2020 is when I started, continuing on with the album. So yeah, it's something that's been in the works for quite some time. And due to the pandemic, I guess we had more time in the sense of like, as I would send songs out to the guys, especially Steve, he would be able to work on his drumming and get it down better and get to know the songs better. And for him, it was like, a really good thing to have all that extra time because, I create a lot of the beats and everything, but then he takes those and then he kind of makes his own thing out of it. And then, he's got to learn it and then he's got to make it his own, so he's got a big job to do. To me, he's got the hardest job before getting into the studio. So it's like, he had that time to really kind of play with the songs, get to know them, work on stuff for long periods of time. So it was awesome. And you could really tell because he did just an absolute phenomenal job on the record. And, having that extra time that really, really helped with that. So yeah, I mean that's when that started. 2018, and I finished the last song the beginning of June of 21.
One thing I'm also very curious because when we realized that all 4 of you live in 4 different states, considering for all of us who in the last 2 years have learned to work from home, that's kind of what you have been doing. So how has that kind of process evolved for you? And because I just realized you said you did the first time songs at rehearsal. So tell us about why it's so strange in terms of did you like kind of share files virtually always and then did that? What was the process like?
Well, back in 2010 is when I first started working with, a multi-track recording computer program, Ableton Live I work with. So that's the first time I started writing stuff on a computer as opposed to like recording riffs on tape, thinking of drum things, going over stuff with Steve, horribly trying to mimic that in front of him saying, something like this, and, so it's a big time consumer and it's a fucking pain in the ass, to be honest with you. So once I started with Majesty and Decay writing that record, that's when, for me personally, that whole thing opened up to me about, creating on the computer. So for me, it was awesome because I can basically, I create up until this day. I write the music, I put drums to it. Sometimes I'll even put solos in there if I know it's going to be a solo spot and I feel I just want to save some space for that. Or, I'll work with that and just when the guys get a song, I finish the song and I send it out to the guys. So when they're listening to it, they're listening to the song minus the vocals, basically. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like the song minus the vocals, and obviously, a slightly more basic version of, of it, but that's what it sounds like. You know what I mean? So they're getting a complete song minus the vocals, so they can get a really good idea of how the feel of the music is, the power of the drums behind the music, what kind of beats, what kind of overlays I put. Sometimes I'll put a solo in there when I know it's definitely going to be a solo spot. I'll do something, especially when it's an ambient part. There's a couple of those I did on this record that I basically flew right from pre-production and put them right on the album, because I kind of just came up with them off the fly, and I liked the way they sounded, and they had a good vibe and atmosphere, and they sounded cool. So I just took them right out of there and put them right on the record, because there was no reason to redo it, because it sounded cool. So basically that's how it's been happening these past 12 years now. So we've been doing it like this, and for instance, up until this last record, I would send the songs out, Steve would get them down. Steve might send a recording of what he's doing. Maybe he wouldn't. He did recently, but back in the day, a few years earlier, like 2010 through maybe 2015 or whatever, he didn't really have that capability, So he would just get the stuff down, and we'd all do it separately, and we'd meet in the studio and start recording. And we'd never play the song once together until we were on stage for the tour for the first show. Like, new songs we would never play live. We'd never played together as a band until we were doing the tour for that record. So we got used to that. But then once Alex joined and we were going to go out on tour, like, we would even do that for tours. But then once Alex was in, he was like, yeah, we should get together, before the tour. And we're like, yeah, you know what? We probably should. That would be a good idea, And then once we started doing that, it was cool. And it's much better to do that, obviously. We just were not lazy, but we had gone out to Ohio so many times in the past, hours out there. We'd work all week on a Friday night, drive 8 hours to Ohio, rehearse for a day and a half, and then come back and then go back to work on Monday. So we did that many years too. But, because of that, we got very happy with the fact that we could just rehearse on our own, do our thing, and meet up and play. And that was it. It made sense. But more recently, we have a little more time, so it made sense to get together and do stuff as a band, which was great. So we did that, for the touring in 2019. And for the first time in many, many years, we did it for this record. We rehearsed about 3 times before we went into the studio. So it was nice, I was able to work out little kinks and stuff that you normally wouldn't, know until you're sitting there in the studio. So it was kind of cool we were able to do that. Yeah. Yeah, so that's been our process. So we were kind of ready for that. We were ready for the process of just, doing our thing on our own, because that's what we usually do anyway. And, we just had to wait until we were able to get together, because there were a lot of restrictions here in New York going out of state and this and that. So we had to just kind of like sit tight, wait until it was okay for us to get together, or we were allowed to get together. And then once we did that, that was it. We scheduled rehearsals and we booked the studio time, and that was it. And we just got it done.
So I'm very curious also now to know, in terms of, since you said that you send the kind of scratch recordings or the initial part of what the song should be like, right? And kind of send it to the rest of the guys. What's the next few parts like, and how do you all kind of come into the final decision, right? I mean, is it a democratic process that, each person takes a call on, this is my instrument and this is what it should sound like, or what my part should be like? Or like, is there someone who has like a veto on a certain song or a certain part?
Yeah, we work pretty easily. I mean, well, bottom line is I sit here until the song's done and I send it out to the guys, and 98.9% of the times that's the song and that's it, because there's no, I thankfully after 30 some odd years, I got it down a little bit better. We have a better idea of what works and doesn't work. So I'll send it out, and sometimes I'm not sure about certain things. Sometimes I overthink it and I'm like, you know what, this is where it is. I'm just going with this, and then, I usually send it to Ross first, because, we've been doing this for the longest, and we have that connection. So I'll send it to Ross first and get his view. And once he's got a good view, which is most of the time, it is what it is. He likes it. Sometimes he'll be like, this is cool. Maybe we could do this, or, we'll tweak a couple of little things, but that's basically what it is. For the most part, once a song gets sent out, it's usually, that's it, because I already know what works and doesn't work myself. You know what I mean? So I'm very, very particular before a song even goes out, or even a riff goes out to anybody, which I don't even do that. Like, it's very rare that I even send out like a part. Like, very rare I'll be like, oh, listen to this part. It's like I just send out the full complete song because it's just, for me, it's a real personal thing, and I'm doing my thing. And then once I feel it's ready, I'm like, I won't even let that out of my sight until I feel like, okay, I think I got it. And then once I send it out, it's usually the case, and then again, there's a couple of times where it'll be like, oh, let's try this or whatever, or let's cut this down or make this longer or whatever. But it's for the most part, once they get it, it's pretty much the song. And sometimes you get a couple of things where, someone will be like, yeah, I don't know. And then you'll be like, give it a couple of minutes, listen to it for a couple of days, because like me and Ross would be confident about it. Be like, no, dude, listen to it for a couple of days. And then it's like, okay, yeah, no, you're all right. Yeah, I like it. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of like that, but we would never, unless it's something, if someone's like, oh, I don't know, this is really, then maybe we'll make an adjustment. But for the most part, once Ross and I agree that we think it's good to go, it's pretty much good to go. There are times in the years ago, for instance, I'll never forget, like Majesty in the K. I was writing a song for that, and I finally had it, and I was like, oh, this is it. And then Steve was just like, I don't know, man. I think you should do this and that. And I was just like, oh man, I was like, so like, oh my God, yeah. So I was like begrudgingly like, and then Ross heard his ideas. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I think that's good. I'm just like, so begrudgingly, I'm like, all right, let me try it out. So on the computer, I did it, and I was like, eh. And then like within a day or two, I'm like, yeah, no, you know what? This is much better. You're absolutely right. So so I always take the ideas from the other guys because I want everyone to be happy with the songs as much as I can. And usually it's always for the best anyway. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So to me, that's you have to kind of like, you got to listen to the other guys because to me they're my judges. You know what I'm saying? Once I put it out there, I have to hear positive stuff from them. For the most part. Otherwise, I feel it's a fail. Or I also like to know if something sounds like something else. If someone thinks it sounds even remotely like something else we did or somebody else is doing, I just drop that instantly because I don't, that to me is like, I don't want to sound like something else. So it's like if anybody even thinks it sounds like this or that, then we'll do something different, and that's it. So they're kind of like my guides with that as well. That's basically the process, in a nutshell.
No, fair enough. And at this point, I want to also ask you because, like, it's kind of hard also when you listen to your discography. But so since you're the primary, you're saying about writing the songs. What's the most challenging song for you off Acts of God, and why?
The most challenging song? I don't. It's not so much. I mean, I could probably, if I think there might be songs that were challenging to write, maybe
Yeah.
now that some of them I would get caught up on. I can't remember which number. Like I'll have a song, and there was one in particular I can't remember. It might have been the opening track, possibly, or there was definitely a couple on this record. I can't remember offhand, but there was definitely a couple where I'd get started on it, and I just didn't know where to. Possibly even Apostle too. Like that was the last song I wrote, and that one went through a few changes, and I wasn't quite happy here and there. And then finally, I got to a point where I'm like, I think this is it, and then I was just like, let me just go with this, and so that happens sometimes with songs. Like I kind of get caught up, and I'll have like 7 different versions of it. I'll keep going and trying different things.
Wow.
And then sometimes I have to let it go. I have to just let it go. I'm just like, you know what? This is a dead subject. Done. Forget it. I'm starting from scratch again. And that's what I do. It's rare, but it does happen. Usually once I start a song, I'll get it done. But there's times when I start and I go through so many different versions, and I'm trying all these different things, and I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just starting over, because, if you're just not feeling it, then, you got to let it go. That's the bottom line. It's got to feel right. Otherwise, it's a fail.
True. But then, so since you said that, there's some songs which there are like 7 versions that you have of, if you could kind of remember, or maybe even give us a working title for the song that you had, which was the easiest one for you to kind of write and then just get it recorded?
I'd say the third song I wrote for this record was Blooded, and that one was pretty straightforward, and I think came together pretty quickly, I believe. It was cool because I was trying to write something like that because, the first track I wrote was News of Thorns, and that was a little more involved, and then the second track I wrote was, what was it, I'm trying to think of the song titles now because I know them as numbers too, so...
That's why I said working title will also do, because it's hard
Well,
sometimes.
yeah. Well, the working titles are 1, 2, 3 to 11. Those are the working titles, and we write down titles. Like Ross and I will write down titles and lyric ideas throughout the whole course of listening to these songs. But until all the songs are done, that's when we get together and we really start working on that. But it was definitely the second song was I can't remember now the name of the title, but Shed the Light was the second song I wrote. So after that song, I was looking for something just really straightforward and intense, and that's when Blooded came through. And yeah, I think that one came together pretty quick, and I like that one quick. And the recording of that was easy. I mean, all the songs, once we got them down and we get into the studio, it's all pretty good. I think the opening track we had a couple issues with, and that was my fault in the studio because there was we do have click tracks. We do basically what I do is once the songs are done and everybody knows them, I'll send to Steve. I'll send him the scratch guitars and the metronome click separately, and then obviously no drums. So he rehearses to that. He hears my demo tape and then he rehearses to the guitars and the click only. And then he takes that right into the studio and records with that. So when preparing that for the studio, somehow I made a malfunction, and there was a click. There was basically a tempo malfunction. So tempo malfunction unfortunately happened one of the few days I was not able to be there. I just had some personal stuff I had to deal with, and I was out of the studio that day, and they were going to get started on that song. And as soon as I got back and saw what it was, I knew exactly. Once I looked on my computer, I saw exactly what the problem was. But that kind of threw Steve off for like an afternoon because it technically was completely wrong, So if you have a tempo going to the next part, up until this part, it's supposed to change tempo for that next part. What happened is that tempo, the line was up like almost like halfway into the next riff accidentally. So the tempo was completely different from the first half of that riff coming in. So which threw it completely off, And I'm sure Steve had a fucking, a rough afternoon with that one. But once I knew what it was, I was like, yeah, this is a total fail. Like, and he somehow he made it kind of work, but it was definitely incorrect. So I had to, we had to do it over. So.
Oh shit!
But that was the biggest thing we had in the studio, and that was just like a minor technicality thing, which was unfortunate, but it happens,
Yeah. Now I just want to quickly kind of transition. Actually, a good way to transition would be we'd want to play a song off the album on the show. Which one should we play and why?
I guess you could play The Age of No Light because we're gonna be that one's kind of going to be debuted tomorrow here too. So, So yeah, let's go with that one because that one's it's a really intense track. It's really powerful. It's very quick and to the point, but it packs a punch and it's dark and heavy and it's got a little bit of everything. But I think it's a real powerful song. So, The Age of No Light.
This insane crusade
transition just to talk a bit about you, right? I mean, and this is something again I've personally noticed, right? With a lot of death metal musicians, there's that stage persona or there's that imagery that you see, right? Like say, for example, we've been talking for a while, and it's so different from what I've seen, just like the promo pictures and things like that. Uh, do you think there's like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, right? Where you'd see like on stage a different persona where it's all aggressive and stuff like that, but off stage, it's just like someone you've known all your life or just kind of like hanging out. Is that the kind of thing that there is an outlet on stage? That's why it is. How would you describe that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like I was talking about earlier, like, yeah, once you're on stage, it's just like, it's a different thing. And we're playing the songs, we're into it. And sometimes, you're concentrating, you're getting into it, you're having a good time, and you're presenting the songs, you're presenting the music. So that's what you're doing. But even sometimes, between songs, or even sometimes I'll be in the middle of a song and I'll make a mistake and I'll just be like, I'll see kids in front row there and I'll do something that just like, I hit a totally fail note on a solo or something, or I totally know I fucked up and I know they know it too. And I'll just give them a look like, yeah, hey, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? So, you break out of that. But it's just like, it's just a performance. It's kind of taking the music that we've written and you're presenting it. So you're kind of you're in that mode, and yes, it's totally an outlet. It's a great outlet because you probably get so much, between just it's a stress reliever. It's just like you're getting a lot out. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I think it's a great outlet, just to get that aggression out, like we all need once in a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, whether you go for a run every day or you go to, the gym or whatever you're doing, it's like, that's kind of what it is. Like, especially on the road when it's hard to do those things sometimes, that's our fucking, that's our cardio. That's our exercise time. We get out there and we just go for it, So yeah. It's that's kind of how it is. But yeah, I mean, the music is dark, so the imagery has to be dark. Not that we're particularly, I mean, we take a picture, yeah, all right, we're not smiling, but it's like, well, other than that, we're just standing there, we're just seriously, whatever, doing a picture. But other than that, it's like, the music is dark, so you want, when you're presenting both the artwork and everything, you want it to all kind of fit together. You know what I'm saying? So, we're not going to have all this dark music and then have a bunch of clowns on the front cover. It just doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Now you mentioned
it's just an art creative thing. That's all.
Fair enough. I get it. Now, you did mention using Ableton, and I actually read up in one of your previous interviews that you said that you actually got introduced to it at your day job. And if I'm not wrong, you actually work in an audiovisual production company for like events and stuff?
Yeah, I do that here and there. Not as much now, but yeah, we would do like weddings, corporate events, stuff like that. And I would run lighting and program lighting and, help with the audio. There would be DJs, DJing and stuff like that.
Okay.
So yeah, I do a number of different things like that. And yeah, that's, we would do video stuff. So yeah, it was cool. Like once I got that program and realized it was, it was good for what I did, because a lot of DJs use that particular program.
Exactly. Yeah.
It has some different setups in it that work great for DJs, but I just saw it was a multi-track. I'm like, okay, multi-track recorder, I'm in. Let me try this out. And sure enough, it was like, yeah, it was gold, man. I was like, wow, this is just awesome.
But I must ask you, right? Considering that you said about like meeting people, has it ever happened that you went at a corporate event and you met like a death metal fan and like they were like, holy fuck, who did I just see at this event? Like, I can't believe this, right? Have you ever encountered situations like that while at work?
Yeah, and it's funny when it does, because it's just so funny because, I'm sitting there doing like, we're at a wedding, right? So we're at, it's a big wedding, but it's like we're at a wedding, we're running lights, we have a DJ, we have like towers around the room with lighting and whatever, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And, I'm sitting there in my freaking jacket and tie or whatever, just doing my business with the guys that I'm friends with there and whatever. And then my friend Angelo, who I'm still friends with today, like he was running some video stuff and he's just like, he told me that some guy come up to him and is just like, hey, is that Robert Vigna? And he's just like, Rob? Yeah. What do you mean? He's just like, so basically it was like a fan, who happened to be at that wedding. And it was so funny.
Oh my God.
Angelo, my friend Angelo brings the fan over to me and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him. He's like, oh my God, and it was just, to me, it's just surreal because it's like two worlds colliding. It's just like, I'm just on the job. You know what I mean? Like I'm extremely, low key, down to earth. I work. I work my whole life. I'm always doing, that kind of work. Loading trucks, doing my thing, bringing, gear. But that's what I do. So whatever. It's like, so to me, it's just like I'm just doing my thing. And then for someone to come over and be like, huh, so it was funny. So I met him. I talked with him a little bit. We took a couple of pictures, and it was the funny story is that he wrote into Decibel magazine. Because they have this fan thing, about writing things that happen to you. So he wrote his story and sent the picture, and sure enough, it ended up in Decibel magazine. Me and him in the photo in one of the issues, like fan of the month, like talking about his story, meeting me at the wedding. So it was pretty funny.
Oh wow! I'm definitely that's something that he's not gonna forget, and it's kind of like in print, right? So that's
oh yeah,
really...
it was so funny, But to me, it's like it's just hysterical because I was just like, yeah, dude, what's up? it was no big deal, but it was just for him. It was just like, surprising. It's just funny, but I get it because that would be like going to see a band I used to listen to when I was younger, going to see club shows or whatever. It's like whatever. It's like seeing the guy from whoever at the your local place. Like what the hell, So yeah, I guess it's a little strange, but it was funny. So that's happened a couple of times, here and there. But and it's weird for me because when you're in the regular world, the real world, so I call it, it's like when you run into people, then that's when it's very strange. You know what I'm saying? Like when you go into St. Vitus or you go to a club in New York, you're going to a death metal show or you're going to an underground show or even a Metallica show, and someone recognizes you or comes up to you, it's like, okay, you get it. It makes sense. You're still in your kind of world. But when you're just like, I'm working at a wedding or I'm walking on the street or Ross would be, when he used to drive trucks in Manhattan, he'd be in Manhattan and someone come up to him. Like when you're in that weird outside world and people are coming and recognize you, that's when it's a little strange. You're kind of like, wow, that's bizarre,
Yeah.
Like you don't expect that, so that's when it's a little funny, for us.
Yeah. But, another thing I must ask you about is you've got a varied and wide taste in music. And what I've actually read is that the fact of most of what you listen to is not metal. So I'm very curious, what are you listening to at the moment and what would you like to recommend to our listeners?
There's so much stuff I listen to. I mean, I do get a lot of inspiration by non-metal stuff. Like this morning, for instance, I was listening to Muse, I like Muse. I think they're a great band, a lot of cool stuff. There's so many things, I forget instantly when people ask me these questions, but
no,
but
and the new Muse
like
single is heavy as fuck. I heard it and I was really surprised.
Cool, yeah. I like it, I'm like, it's pretty cool, very dark, That's what I like about them. They're dark, but they do it in such a cool, uplifting way, but and a lot of the stuff they're talking about is very cool too, they're very, there's a lot of cool political stuff in there, but there's a lot of dark stuff, and I like it, they're amazing musicians. So for me, they're like one of my go-to bands, I definitely love them. A Perfect Circle, I like them a lot. They're a really good band. So many different things. Radiohead, I love Radiohead. Alex kind of pushed me out. I liked a few of their songs for sure, but then after Alex was with, we'd be on tour and he'd be like, oh, you got to check this out. And, he'd kind of keep pushing it on me. I'm like, yeah, I got to check that out more. And then I'll check it out. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are great, So yeah, I like a lot of different kind of stuff, stuff that's moody, but has, just has that emotion. To me, heavy music or dark music doesn't need to be fucking, heavy and aggressive either. Dark music could be all different kinds. Sometimes to me, the softer non-metal stuff is darker and creepier than a lot of metal stuff. You know what I mean? So, and that inspires me, So,
yeah. I mean, especially
I
some
like
of
I like a lot of different kinds of music.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't listen to a lot of country and stuff like that, but some of the stuff that they talk about is metal as fuck, right?
Oh, there's definitely some cool stuff. I'm not a big country fan either, but you got to give Dolly Parton credit. I give her the best credit ever. She's got some classic tunes. But yeah, it's always very dark and misery. There's a lot of misery in that music for sure. It's true. So yeah, I mean, I like that kind of music. I like uplifting music too. There's a lot of different music I like. It's just a matter of what mood you're in and what you feel like listening to. Music is just like anything else. It goes with your moods too. Sometimes you want to hear something aggressive and heavy. Sometimes you just want to hear something that's just light and easy and nice, So it just depends on the mood, And I don't omit anything from my, listening. It's just a matter of what I feel like checking out, and sometimes I'll check out some new stuff or whatever, but I would never say like, oh, I won't listen to that. I'll always give something a chance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Now, it's been such a great chat with you, but I can't let you go without asking you this, right? Over the last, especially like for us growing up in India, right? You, for the longest time pre-internet, would kind of read magazines, and then like earlier on in the internet, before like streaming and things like that, you just like managed to get certain bands or hear about certain things. And when it came to like New York death metal, right? One of the bands that would always keep getting recommended that New York death metal sound would be Immolation. Looking back at the last 30 years, how does it feel just thinking about it? Like just being one of those bands that kind of push that sound in there. Like, do you believe that there's like a New York death metal sound, or was it just like, some kind of tag that would is easy to kind of package everything together?
Yeah, I mean, for us, New York back in the day, especially, was more known for hardcore than anything else. And then, I guess there was definitely more of an aggressiveness to the music for sure with a lot of the bands that were the death metal bands for sure. But I have to say, like, and maybe because some of these other bands, like, Mortician and Incantation, were also inspired by bands that we were too, which was like, early Sepultura, like the old school stuff like Morbid Visions and all that, or very early Destruction, the early German bands like, Creator, Destruction, Sodom, all that early stuff was what I think we were all inspired by, like, the first couple of Possessed records and all that stuff, so we were inspired more, I'd say, more heavily by like bands outside of the US than anything else, when it came to our heavy inspirations, so yeah, I mean, that's just what we got into. That's what we liked, and we just kept we did our thing from there. So I'd say that had a more heavy, we were more inspired by like, the early German thrash stuff, because that was more like darker back then. You know what I mean? It was like more you know what I'm saying? Like thrash has become a little different now. But those early bands like Creator, Destruction, and stuff like that, back in the day, especially, they were very dark and very just, very sick. Early Sepultura, all that stuff, and Possessed, obviously, from Cali, but they, super dark and heavy, and just that atmosphere. And that's the thing that always drew us in, I think, just that dark, heavy aggressiveness, and that's what we got our main inspiration from overall, aside from, of course, the staples like Metallica, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and all that, that was always, there for us, Slayer, all that stuff, of course. But yeah, when we were writing by the time we were writing our stuff, we started getting into the heavier stuff, the darker stuff, even darker. And then that's kind of like where we kind of started, you could say.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, it's been nice to, 30 years later or more, and looking back, when we were doing this, playing clubs, we would go to play our local club and we'd play some original songs, but play cover songs, but the cover songs nobody knew either, So it's like, oh, this is Morbid Visions from Sepultura. People go like, what? And then meanwhile, like 6 months to a year later, we'd do that again, and then they knew about it, So we were doing stuff before people even, knew what the hell was going on. Back then it was like thrash was a big thing, and we were doing death metal, and a lot of the thrash bands would look at us like, what the fuck are these guys doing? Who are these guys? What is this all about? And then meanwhile, like, later on, they were starting to get into that stuff, so it was kind of cool to be in that early stage, and see how it's transformed over the years.
Yeah. But, I'm really glad that you guys are, like, so many years later still fucking kicking ass and putting out great music like Acts of God. Thank you so much, Rob. I mean, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking time out to speak to us.
Oh, no problem. Thank both of you for having me. Appreciate it. And thank all the fans in India. I hope everyone's well over there. And we do look forward to getting back there as soon as possible. It's definitely a spot we want to return to as soon as we can. And we just look forward to playing live again, especially there in Bangalore. So, yeah, just take care of yourselves. And we hope to get to see you soon.
So that was Robert Vigna, and yes, in case you're wondering why it didn't feature any chat about Immolation in India, well, we did chat, but alas, there's little to no recording of it. Maybe we release it someday, maybe we don't. All I know is that the band had a great Indian experience and definitely want to return. Hope all of you are staying safe and staying well. Chime in, we don't bite. We are at hornsupod.com or on Twitter at hornsupod. I am at Asmo Ani and you can reach out to Peter at Trend Crusher. Horns up.